during your presentation, which was by the way excellent, you were mentioning GDP as an indicator that implies a merely economic approach. And you were mentioning that it should be a more fortunate indicator related to sustainable development. Could you elaborate on that?
GDP measures money output of an economy, and as we all know, money isn't everything. There are quite a lot of elements of human happiness and well-being that don't depend on money, and therefore aren't taken into account in GDP. And there are some very striking graphs that you can see in European websites showing how GDP has grown over the last 30 years, steadily at 2% per annum, up or down a bit, down a little bit at the moment. And then there are other indicators of human happiness or well-being that have been fairly static. We've had 30 years of economic growth without people in general feeling any better for it. And you can all see examples of that, of things where we have more things, but we don't feel better as people as a result. So the idea is to try and find some indicator of progress that shows how we can get to a more satisfied, happy state in the future without just using up and consuming more and more of the world's limited resources. And then if we could set that as a goal for what politicians and the economy is trying to achieve, rather than just more and more mindless consumption of resources.
I'm having like a pro-American approach right now, and I was wondering why do we have so many strategies in Europe and consequently in Romania and Central and Eastern European states? The thing is that, for example, U.S. states, or the states from the United States of America, are already adapting and mitigating climate change effects right now. It's happening via local development, you can say so, and local governments and businesses are already doing, and they're making a lot of steps into that direction. Latvia, for example, earlier on mentioned that businesses, especially in Eastern Europe, especially in Romania, are pretty much equivocal when asked about climate change, their own climate change policies. So why so many strategies? Well, in the United States, they're already adapting to that. While, I don't know, China is burning African coal, and they're making probably the best and the cheapest solar panels. You know, it's pretty interesting.
Well, I quite agree with you that strategies are no substitute for action, and the Americans, when they get going in the right direction, we all admire their can-do philosophy, and they're getting on with doing that. And now increasingly we are having to admire the Chinese for their can-do philosophy. I suspect we're going to be even more admiring of the Chinese in the future than we used to be of the Americans in that capacity. Now, if a strategy is a substitute for action, bad thing, I agree with that. What a strategy ought to be about is stimulating, coordinating, getting action going. The best strategies, I think, can achieve that result, but they're not the action themselves. They're only the precursor to action, the plan for action.
Okay. And the last between sustainable development and democracy. There are obviously the Western peoples already confront issues like migration and other extremely profound social issues happening at least in the European Union, and the way they vote, and there are political wings that wouldn't go into that direction, in the direction of sustainable development. They're pretty much confrontation in terms of groups.
Well, I believe that the transformation that took place in Eastern Europe, including Romania in the 1990s, was, among other things, about a greater recognition of the need to look after the environment. The former communist governments, with their suppression of popular participation and with their suppression of information, had permitted some pretty bad environmental deterioration to take place. and that part of the opening up, the Velvet Revolution, the change that we all managed to make, was getting more openness about these matters and was allowing people's aspirations for a better environment to come through and have an effective voice in politics. So I think democracy is an important part of raising consciousness about the need to do something about the environment. Not perfect, because sometimes people don't see what they need to do. And perhaps China is an example of a country that's managing to operate quite well on the environment at the moment without very much of Western-style democracy. Though I think it is probably interesting that even without having formal democracy, some of the change that is taking place in China at the moment on environmental questions is a result of popular pressure coming up on the people in China don't like the dirty atmosphere that they have in some of their cities any more than anybody else does. They don't like the dirty water. As they're becoming more prosperous, they want something done about it. Even though it's not called democracy, that's a democratic pressure that is operating in China just as much as it does in Romania or in Great Britain.
Thank you. Oh, one more question. Do you have any expectations from Cancun this year?
Modest expectations, but I'm not giving up on the international negotiations. I agree with you that the most important thing that's happening in the world on climate change at the moment is that some of the big economies, China, the USA, and so on, are beginning to put large sums of money into the industrial transformations that are needed. And that it may be that they will have to get a bit further to feel confident enough of where they're going to get to finalise an international binding agreement. So it may take a lot longer to get to the full international agreement. But I think we shall get there in the end. I always remember what happened about the hole in the ozone layer and the elimination of the CFCs. And for a long time, the international negotiations went rather slowly, and in Europe we all had the impression that the Americans were blocking progress. But what they were actually doing was that their leading chemical companies were trying to invent what we needed after CFCs to do, refrigeration and so on. And when they'd cracked that, suddenly the Americans became the leaders again, and we all had to start buying the American products that we use instead of CFCs.
It was again business-driven, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So I shouldn't be surprised if something similar happens in relation to climate change. That when the industrial leaders have solved the problem of how to have a really effective electric car, when they can see how to do renewable energies in a way that can be scaled up on a very large scale, then suddenly they'll swing in, and we shall have been talking, as you say, making too many strategies, and we might have fallen behind on the industrial competition. So we must make very sure in Europe that we get on with the industrial transformation if we're not to be left behind.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.